Hiya! Welcome to this, my 41st episode of Video Fuzzy. I'm your host, Terry J. Amon, and in this installment, titled Wire in the Podcast, I encountered an episode of BBC production called Wire in the Blood, and I close out my run of Terminal City. For the first time in months, I encountered a scrap of something I need some help with in crowdsourcing. My current collection is mostly taken up with Benedict Cumberbatch being amazing in Sherlock, and I got actual feedback from a person. It's so exciting. Welcome to the show.
He doesn't have that on video, does he? We'll find out together on video, Fuzzy.
And what's going on with me? I managed to catalog through disc 600 in my classic collection, and as I mentioned last time, the end is in sight on my third binder of Classic VHS-to-DVD collection discs, so yay, progress is happening. Otherwise, after 2 long weekends over Christmas and New Year's, I've just put in my first full week of work, and I think we need to come up with something like second Saturdays or something, because I'm well into Saturday afternoon writing up notes at the City Brew in Bismarck. Love this place. Not a sponsor, I should mention. It is just a great place to kick back, collect your thoughts, and enjoy some tasty coffee. And oh man, I've got Dia Frampton from the first season of NBC's The Voice covering REM's Losing My Religion playing. Wow, if I could just get that vibe on repeat the whole rest of the afternoon, that'd be fantastic. Let's get to this. Crowdsourcing! I want to start out with a segment I haven't pulled in for a while. So far, best of my ability, between Google research and crowd input, I've sourced every scrap of video in my collection. But last week on disc 599, I ran into a 2-minute scrap of sketch comedy that frankly has me stumped. Welcome to Crowdsourcing Exhibit E. 3 women present young medieval characters. The only name I caught was Guinevere, and they reference a friend of theirs, Juliet, who they say is just so stuck up and full of herself they wish she'd just throw herself off that balcony already. One of them admires another's tall, pointy hat with the stocking trailing from it, and she says, "Oh, do you like it? It's my damsel in distress look. Check this out. Help! Help! Isn't it great?" She got it at Ye Olde something or other. Guinevere asks her, "What do you think about Madonna?" and pulls out an icon featuring Mary and Jesus. The other, heavier-set young woman is into music. She's got a lute and is planning to go to a concert, Drawbridge Up at 9 p.m. As the scene opens, she's standing next to a poster advertising Prince. Anyway, I posted some photos at Video Fuzzy's Facebook page, which Facebook assures me were seen by dozens of people. Friend of the show Jesse Zimmerman suggested it could be from some iteration of Blackadder or Maid Marian and Her Merry Men, but the internet can't confirm that for me, and theme-drawn as they were, they don't lend themselves to sketch comedy, which I suspect this was. The opening half-second of this recording is those women in a completely different sketch, where the heavy-set blonde, I swear I'm not being in any way judgmental, she looks fantastic. If I had a name for her, that's how I'd refer to her. I'd look her up on IMDb and this segment would even have happened. But yeah, the heavier of the blonde women is sitting on a bed in a garret bedchamber, wearing big floofy pink jammies, playing the bongos as the other 2 are in the other bed. Those photos in the comments on the Video Fuzzy Facebook post. The scene ends abruptly and shifts directly to the next scene, suggesting sketch comedy. All the women in references are British or throwback modern pop culture references, so that could help narrow it down. Adding a bit more by way of context, this sketch was recorded after the Grey's Anatomy 4th season finale in May of 2008 on ABC, and the sci-fi rebroadcast of Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who's Girl in the Fireplace, which of necessity aired sometime after October of 2006. Everything I recorded was from DVR at that point, and reruns abound, so the sketch could have been produced at any time since the advent of color television, but the Madonna and Prince references seem to narrow it down to the 1990s or late 80s at the earliest. Naturally, there were no network watermarks, which would have helped, and I didn't recognize any of the actresses or anything that would have helped narrow it down to the show it was from. It wasn't screamingly funny, but it was mildly amusing, and it is in this collection, so I'd love to narrow it to a specific show, so any help at all would be appreciated. Thanks!
Friday Night Feature.
For my Friday night feature, I was all set to review my closeout for Terminal City, the 10th and final episode of which turned up on disc 587. I'd mentioned the series most recently in episode 39 when I encountered episodes 5 through 8 on discs 568 and 569, and longtime listeners will recall the pilot episode was my Friday night feature for episode 23, Ghosts in the Podcast, when the show first turned up in my collection on disc 459. Now, I put some lovely comments together on that rather astonishing and singular intersection of tragicomic drama and pointed, poignant commentary, and will totally share them, but last weekend I encountered a dark and twisted piece of crime drama that I feel nudges Terminal City's terminus out of this primary position. In 2002, the BBC turned a psychiatrist loose on the criminal element in Great Britain. Robson Green, as Dr. Tony Hill, peered into the motivations of increasingly wackadoo serial killers and criminals in a sizzling series titled Wire in the Blood. The fourth season's third episode, Hole in the Heart, originally aired in October of 2006 and appeared in this collection on discs 600 and 601. Placing this production into just the tiniest bit of context, breakout profiler Silence of the Lambs came out as a book and a movie by Thomas Harris in 1991. Before that, Jonathan Kellerman's child psychiatrist Alex Delaware started tracking Angelino criminals as a consultant for LAPD detective Milo Sturgis in the mid-1980s, and I just discovered his first novel, When the Bough Breaks, was adapted as a movie starring Ted frigging Danson and Richard Masur in 1986. I read dozens of Kellerman novels, well, both of the Kellermans, Faye and Jonathan, and never realized they'd been adapted. I'll have to keep an eye out for that. Caleb Carr's historical fiction, The Alienist, released in 1994, I've mentioned it here and there during last year's run of the limited TNT series, posits the contributions of psychiatry to criminal investigation before psychiatric inquiry even had a name, tracing investigations on this side of the Atlantic near the same time period as such inquiries were called upon in the investigation of Jack the Ripper's crimes in London. Also dating from the mid to late 90s, Ali Walker as brilliant forensic psychologist Samantha Waters tracked Dennis Christopher as the elusively clever jack-of-all-trades through his various criminal exploits in Profiler. I can't wait for that show to show up in this collection because there are a zillion references, but for now, suffice it to say I had a massive crush on Ali Walker, and that pulled me much farther along into the adventures of the Violent Crimes Task Force than I probably would otherwise ever have gotten, and to save some time, I'll reiterate my love for Mandy Patinkin and Matthew Gray Gubler and Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins in my fascination with Criminal Minds and the Hannibal series. So, in the mid-noughties, I was still more than mildly interested in profilers. I hadn't yet rejected the genre out of hand. I was reading profiler novels and watching profiler shows and thinking that they were outrageously clever. Good Lord, I actually got through a couple of Alex Cross novels, well, books on tape, but yeah, complete waste of time, James Patterson pointlessness, before concluding that a writer in a room can decide what psychological underpinnings any bizarre sequence of criminal activity that would supersede self-preservation and lead, oh wow, how did I not see it before? The killer smeared the peanut butter all over his victim's genitals in a counterclockwise configuration, thereby subconsciously sublimating his punishment or wetting the bed well into his teens, and oh right, he's the one who's been showing up at every single press conference we've held on this case. Book 'em, Dano. So, in this episode of Wire in the Blood, titled Hole in the Heart, psychiatrist Tony Hill is called in to assist in the investigation of what appears to be a double homicide, one man chained to an iron bed frame while another watches. Well, that's what the stupid flat-footed coppers conclude. Hill sees immediately that the chair has been moved, posits a glass used to administer drugs to the actual victim before he was chained to the bed and burned to death, broken and then cleaned up by the real killer, a fastidious neat freak cultist who, oh yeah, his wife's diagnosis as an invalid was confirmed only a week prior, so clearly he's keen to end it all. They then encounter another murder-suicide by a streetwalker of a parish priest. She drugged and arranged the vicar's body like the beatified Saint Sebastian, complete with his eyes pinned open, before she hanged herself in the bell tower. Then another crazy religious nut ties a millstone around his neck and hops in the river, and a judge is beheaded and arranged like St. John the Baptist on a silver platter by his rent boy lover before he commits suicide in the judge's bathtub. Now, honest to freaking God, the symbolism is so far over the top. These arrangements too detailed for assorted cult members to organize. For Christ's sakes, one of them straps a bomb to herself and assaults a police officer member of this cult to assure his silence. And what are we even talking about here? You only need, the first couple of attacks to recognize the religious iconography being emulated. I mean, even without the spears in place. Oh, that was fun. This streetwalker used authentic 3rd century swords she brought with her special. They're nowhere in evidence. But yeah, the St. Sebastian wounds were evocative of famous Renaissance artworks. I don't know, maybe you're looking for a university lecturer on art history who, hey, he's a cult member, and these famous paintings are a regular part of his lecture. What are the odds? Maybe you want to ask him some questions. You think? And even in the mid-noughties, you've got phone contacts to track, and oh wow, specialized makes of Chinese sex handcuffs to run to Earth, and if all of these people are members of a crazy cult branching off from the Masons that, for F's sake, this semi-public psychiatrist has managed to infiltrate halfway through the episode, do you not imagine these murder-suicides would get nipped in the bud before 7 of them happen and a dozen people die? That blew my mind. How stupid do the cops, the consulting psychiatrists, and the cultists need to be? And what, for Christ's sakes, what is the friggin' point? One of the motives they suggest is that people these days aren't religious enough. Oh, well, I imagine the best way to change people's minds about religion is to cobble together some sort of murder-suicide cult where adulterers are burned to death and vaguely modernist priests are drugged and stabbed and strung up like a Christmas ham, or behead a judge and drown yourself, or just grab a millstone and hop in the river. It's rapturous! These murderers, they're so attuned to the will of God, they're committing obviously despicable, flamboyantly indulgent murders. They're so driven in their purpose, but at the same time so secretive about their motivation that no one in their lives, including in one case their consulting psychiatrist, has any inkling about it, but actual violations, were we attributing commandments directly to Jehovah, commandments such as thou shalt not murder. I mean, that's on the Billboard Top 10. I mean, thank God for Tony Hill for such insights as the murder and post-mortem arrangement, according to hagiographic iconography, of a priest in a church might be religiously motivated. His repeated chats with a beautiful young neurotic, charismatically subordinate to mass murder. Oh, Christ, this was rich. The episode opens on Dr. Hill talking this young guy down from the roof, meeting with him a few times, and oh no, he's giving up his worldly possessions. That's an indicator of suicide. But it's just so that he can help the homeless. Oh, what a relief. But in fact, he'd been all but instantly Svengali'd by one of these very murder-suicide cultists that Tony has been investigating. And oh no, he's infected pigeons with bubonic plague, because that's something random people could do, and is just about to unleash them on an unsuspecting city when Dr. Hill confronts him and stops him in the nick of time, saving the day. And in the final moments of the episode, the pigeons are burned alive. What the actual... Seriously, I'm sure they just poison their food. No one wants screaming, flaming birds flapping themselves to death in a wire cage on a, by the way, rooftop of an apartment building people are living in. But that's just one parting shot for this. Oh my God, did you guys at any point consult law enforcement in putting this together? Or a psychiatrist? Animal control? Anyone? I mean, oh yeah, sure, if we had a pigeon coop full of pigeons we needed to put down to avert a public health crisis, we'd just take a flamethrower to them. That's logical. Basil?
Right, that's done. Now, Sybil, everything done here?
You put the lid on the tank, Basil.
That's why I've been on the roof the last 40 minutes, yeah, yes.
And you took the pigeons out?
No, I left them in. They're nearly done. Now, the walls?
This show was... I could not remember recording it. I do not remember it at all. This thing lasted for 6 seasons. IMDb says 31 episodes running from 2002 to 2009. I certainly hope I don't have a lot of this one. Contrast that with Criminal Minds running 14 seasons now, hundreds of episodes, syndicated across entire channels with at least 2 spin-offs I'm aware of, and I know I've got lots of that one in my collection, but seriously, this just highlights the kind of dumbness we're dealing with in the worst of these productions. How did British people put up with this? We Americans, when we hear people speaking with British accents, we think, oh, wow, we should probably listen to them. They sound so smart. They have grammar school training in logic and the classics and in constructing arguments. But actual British people know that there are dumb British people they would never listen to about anything. And damn, I was running into this throughout this production. The title, Hole in the Heart, references a conversation Dr. Hill traces with one of these cultist priests talking about how society needs to become more God-fearing again, more religious, that there's a hole in our heart only God can fill, etc. But they proceed to commit the most short-sighted, self-serving, and utterly pointless crimes. All the while, the way it's written, all of the conversations sound quite logical. The investigators don't sound particularly brain-damaged, but taken as a whole, this case couldn't have developed like this. The investigation wouldn't have proceeded so poorly. There would have been rafts of evidence, because there simply would have been, and it would have ended before it even started, because someone involved would have said, you know, this is stupid, and it's not going to work, so let's stop trying to pretend we're the movie Seven, and maybe, I don't know, feed the hungry and minister to the poor or something. Not an especially good use of disk space with this one, I'm afraid.
Diving into the classic collection.
In my Classic VHS-to-DVD collection, I mentioned I took in the final episode of Terminal City, the CBC limited series about the devastating impact of cancer on families and the erosion of human decency in the wake of reality television. Through the course of the 10-episode production, we watched Katie Sampson and her family plow doggedly through their various stages of grief in response to matriarch Katie's cancer diagnosis. We watch a mom try to prepare her family for the worst as she herself is not ready to go, not ready to say goodbye, along with family drama dealing with family history, her father-in-law, his support structures and resources available to an intact family unit, as well as the devastating impact of sickness and loss in the wake of late-stage metastatic breast cancer, simultaneously amplified and parodied by the intrusive nature of this reality show she's taken over, this charismatic mother of three, pluckily, cheekily, devil-may-care tilting at windmills, the sheer unreality of the situation demonstrated over and over again. She didn't ask for cancer, she did not ask for all these cameras to be in her face, but she makes the absolute best of it right up until the, well... Episode 10 is a real think piece. Whereas the first 9 episodes go all over the place, her father-in-law is trying to support freedom fighters in Israel who've been accused of terrorism, her daughter is sleeping with her teacher, her son, there's stuff going on with both her sons. Honestly, I skimmed, I didn't rewatch it all. I want to at some point. This is a really well-drawn series, but I do also want to make some headway on this project. At the center of it all is Katie Sampson, played by Maria Del Mar, a woman taking her terminal diagnosis head-on with a sense of humor and spirit. That culminates at the top of the finale as she's on the operating table, flatlining. Her brain is flashing images. Maybe the tests were negative. Maybe there was never a call not to take. Maybe her husband Ari just came home and she was just in her backyard practicing her golf swing. She wakes up in the OR. She's alone. She calls Ari. She's having a lot of trouble getting through. She walks to the studio where she's being memorialized. Brendan Vaughn, the producer of her show, is being interviewed. She was a patient, Ted. She was a patient diagnosed with cancer. She was a mother. We don't like to program things that say mothers die. It scares us. It scares our audience out there in TV land. It makes them think that it might happen to them, that this scourge, this disease might visit their house, might claim a parent, or even worse, a child. Do you have a child, Ted? Is he healthy? That's the way it should be, shouldn't it? You see, we really can't program reality. Wife swapping on a desert island, come on. Eating insects in front of a camera, it's BS. We don't program reality at all. Planes flying into buildings is reality. That nice man who smiled at you seconds earlier blows himself up at a supermarket. That's reality. The terrifying thing about living is leaving. We never want to go, do we, Ted? The fading light, the closing door, The fear that it's not having enough time. We really can't program reality. We choose other things instead. As she steps away from this surreal scene, Ari arrives at the hospital to take her home, where she flashes to images of her family around the dinner table, so different from what her life has become by the end. She flashes to a conversation with her mother. I'm not sure we ever saw her in this series before now. She's getting ready for some big day, and her mother smoking a cigarette and telling her, "Getting old ain't so bad. Everyone wants to give you a second chance." Little do they know. When you're my age, you want to do the limo driver. "The paper boy starts looking good," she said. Katie is laughing, scandalized. She flashes to a moment with her daughter borrowing her lipstick for a big day. She doesn't want to go. Ari takes her to the church, seemingly to her funeral, pausing for a moment with his sons outside the sanctuary as she looks on. "She would have loved today," he said. "You know that. You know she would have laughed, knowing that everyone was here. She would have turned it into a big party. You know your mother. She would have loved seeing you guys dressed up. She loved to throw a party, you remember? Don't forget her." They go in, and alone, he turns to face her. "You're here. I knew you'd be here. Oh, Katie. You are so beautiful. You burn in Sarah and Nikki and Eli, but most of all you burn in me. Don't worry. You burned. You burned so badly. I love you." She follows Ari into, no, not her funeral. A wedding. Perhaps a granddaughter? Certainly some family member. Everyone turned out for this event. She sees a little boy at the wedding who waves at her. She steps away and the wedding vanishes. She revives momentarily in the operating room, and she sees the little boy over the doctor's shoulder. She flashes to a scene where they are children playing together, and when she sees the boy again, now as an adult, she goes to him, ready to move on. "Don't let go," she breathes, and holding his hand, enters the cold, snowy light. That was pure art. Really, the whole episode kept you so off balance. You assume she's dead. The interview in the studio is unmistakable. It's possible it's all in her mind. Television does this. The scene where she's in her backyard hitting golf balls, directly out of the pilot episode. Maybe this whole series has been speculative. Maybe she's fine. Maybe she's been fine this whole time. The supper with her children and her husband and father-in-law, like all the others, like a million before, but no, to wake up to the cold, stark reality of loss, coping with your own loss, incapable of saving your beloved family from their pain. It's dark, but it was respectful. That was a huge argument for this show, that reality television is intrusive, it's loud, it's driven by spectacle. A show like Post-Op, complete with exclamation point, a logical extension of the cultural landscape of 2005, confronts patients recuperating from surgery at some of their most vulnerable moments and tosses them out as mass entertainment for voyeurs. It's ugly, but it didn't become better when they trained the cameras on just one patient and the trials she was facing through her poor prognosis and treatment. Just because she was one patient and not many, just because we got to know her while the rest were relatively anonymous, just because she was charismatic and the doctor running the other show wasn't, that didn't make it better. It made it all the more painful because now this is a person we didn't know, but she's on our screens and we've come to know her, but she's dying, and in fact she's going to be just as dead as she was if we'd never met her. So in the show, Katie becomes the face of cancer. We're rooting for you. We all hope you'll get better. We know you will. It's a TV show. It'll have a happy ending. But like her producer said, the problem with cancer is that it's too real. Reality television isn't in the business of reality. It's in the business of the subjunctive, the speculative. What if we all switched houses? What if we all switched wives? Wouldn't that be a hoot? Sell some erectile dysfunction meds, over-the-counter digestive medication, some car trading app, and boom, that's our primetime lineup. Christ. Terminal City. What a great show. In other discoveries, well, this was more coincidental than anything else. A duplicate for my current collection on disc X191 turned up, as well as disc 585 in my classic collection, where Comedy Central aired the 1987 Mel Brooks parody Spaceballs. The inimitable Joan Rivers voiced Princess Vespa's chaperone droid Dot Matrix. Oh, hey, and I see where Bill Pullman, who I've really enjoyed in USA's The Sinner series, played Lone Star in that piece. But that's for some other time, not now. Anyway, I encountered the late Ms. Rivers' voice here as Dot Matrix in Spaceballs right after encountering her on an episode of The Simpsons on disc 584, the episode Viva Ned Flanders, back before Maud Flanders met with an unfortunate accident. Ned is frazzled at the notion that he's become too predictable, so Homer kidnaps him and drives him to Las Vegas. Ned is agitated and overstimulated by all the lights and sounds and such, and gets out of the car only to meet up with Joan. Well, to be fair, the character is never named, but it's clearly meant to be Joan. She accosts Ned to be in the audience for her infomercial. Alarmed, Ned hops back into Homer's car, but she reappears, running alongside them. "Please, my daughter is not talented!" So, two different and completely unrelated Joan Rivers representations on two adjacent discs. Coincidence? Yes, almost certainly. This cataloging effort also turned up a musical number from Wild Bart's Can't Be Broken, in which the children of Springfield, reacting to the imposition of a curfew, are inspired by an old Children of the Corn-style horror movie to broadcast their parents' secrets until the curfew is lifted. The kids, adults, and seniors of Springfield launch into a delightful parody of What's the Matter with Kids Today before a new curfew is imposed on anyone under the age of old. Then, a season 19 episode featured the classic evolution couch gag, which is an extended run tracing Homer from a single-celled organism through the projected evolutionary development of multi-celled organisms to vertebrates to walking on land to our common primate ancestor, passing Mo, who is devolving the other direction. Homer then morphs through several identifiable stages in Western civilization and finally into himself, taking a seat on the couch, and Lisa asks what took him so long. This episode, titled Mona Lisa, featured Homer's mother, voiced by Glenn Close. I didn't watch this one to comment on it specifically, but at the end it was dedicated to the memory of Elsie Castellaneta, which to me seems like a class send-off. I found another episode of Boston Legal, this one featuring George Segal as a GOP operative offering William Shatner as Denny Crane the GOP candidacy in lieu of John McCain. George Segal was familiar to me as a young man who turned up for cocktails with Dick and Liz back in the 60s in my beloved classic Edward Albee's Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which I know for sure is going to turn up in this collection at some point. What a get. Anyway, it turned out to be just an elaborate prank meant to humiliate Denny Crane, but he got the last laugh, turning the Federal Election Commission on his pranksters. Notable from this episode, Gina Torres of Firefly and Serenity appears as an assistant DA, completely unrecognizable from her character in The Shield, turned up not too long ago in my classic collection. Also, Missy Pyle appeared as a woman suing the Catholic Church to join the priesthood. She worked with Shatner again a few years later in Stuff My Dad Says. Commenting on Segal's plan to draft Denny Crane for the GOP nomination, James Spader's Alan Shore remarked, "I so miss a little dignity in America. I suppose I'm most worried that if you ran for president, you might actually win." Oh, Alan, from your lips to God's ear. Oh, and I encountered a couple different takes on relationships for this one for my classic collection and one for my current. So, since the themes are sort of linked, I figured this would be the best place to talk about them, starting on my classic collection side with an episode from the 3rd season of My Name is Earl, in which he's encountered Alyssa Milano as Billy, a female version of himself, a girl Earl, as the episode title puts it. She wants to appease karma too, so she's got a list of people that she's wronged, and she's trying to make amends. At first, he's thrilled. Earl is just smitten with Billy, the ex-girlfriend of prison bully Frank, played by Michael Rappaport, who I recognized more from Prison Break on Fox. Earl gets a little miffed at her lackadaisical approach to karma, however, where she just calls everyone on her list and apologizes. Earl feels that in order to really make up for the bad stuff he's done to people, he's got to actually do something to undo the ill effects of however he wronged them. Exploring this disagreement he's having with Billy, he talks to his ex-wife, Joy, who says, "Of course, that's all that marriage is," she said, "accepting the annoying crap your partner makes you put up with." Food for thought.
Current collection.
The other half of this discussion comes from this past week's episode of The Good Place, which I brought in so recently I haven't even cataloged it yet, but it's on Disc X208 of my direct-to-DVD recordings. This past week's adventure seemed a bit louche from what up until now have been 3 seasons of crackling suspense. Team Cockroach is trapped in the mailroom of The Good Place, which is actually a kind of hell for Tahani given the green carpeting that is just sickening her soul. The point of this episode, which did drag but it was a bit unavoidable, was for Michael to convene and address the ruling council of The Good Place, which he was in no way authorized to do. With his evidence, the bad place had corrupted the point system, gumming up the work so bad that no one had gotten into The Good Place for the past 5 centuries. From a paradox Tahani encountered when no matter what she did, she could not make things right between herself and Janet, since she'd married Jason, who Janet was in love with, or with Jason, who was bummed about having read Janet's diary while secured within her reality and discovering that she had feelings for him. When Tahani brought that quandary up with Michael, thumbing through the book of Doug's that they'd stolen from accounting, realized that this was the current problem with humanity: unintended consequences. This was an aspect of the point system I felt had gotten very little attention up until now, so I was happy to see it explored. Michael noted that life is so interconnected and complicated at this point that the energy we send into the universe often has negative impacts we never intend or even think about, which is how something nice, like sending someone flowers, could contribute to economic inequality and ecological devastation and global warming, all because of the economic system that's in place that makes it possible to send someone flowers in the first place. But the main discussion I wanted to parallel from the last segment was relationships. Restored to their memories and personalities, Chidi and Eleanor try to have a date in the Good Place mailroom. It actually goes quite well, despite Chidi nerding out pretty badly at least once, and then turning it right around when he dresses up actually as a mailman, an acknowledged fetish for Eleanor. She's so instantly thrilled and turned on that she bursts into tears. "Relationships are stupid," she sobs. "You're so scared you'll never find a good one. Then once you do, you're scared it's going to end." I thought that was brilliant. This show is brilliant. It seemed like it was going to be stuck in endless cycles of bureaucratic nonsense while the committee didn't actually do anything at all. But in fact, next week our heroes, Team Cockroach, are being hauled before the judge, so... oh wow, really looking forward to seeing what happens next. And a side note, another bridge from that to that and this to this, Ted Danson as Michael from The Good Place, his appearance in the mid-1980s Kellerman adaptation I've never seen, looking exactly like Sam Malone from Cheers, while playing a psychiatrist. Well, I'm guessing Kelsey Grammer as Frasier, then also of Cheers, must have seen that movie at least once, however well it did, so awkward. And then, from My Name is Earl, the last episode, Love Octagon, featured Mike O'Malley as Stewart, and then here he was in the closing moments of The Good Place as the frog-obsessed doorman. Fun! Also in my current collection, well, last time I completely spaced mentioning an episode of Superstore where Amy and Jonah attended the managers' conference. The writers completely shit the bed on this one. Specifically, if you were looking for a fairly predictable topic of conversation at an annual managers' conference for Cloud9 managers, anticipate that the worldwide simulcast of what ended with Amy and Jonah in flagrante delicto on all channels mere months ago was probably going to come up. So maybe they'd understand if Glenn and Dina might not want to attend and represent the store from where those floor workers were seen. Oh, hey, you guys look kind of familiar. All right. So, District Manager Jeff being there, making sure Amy and Jonah, whatever fake name tags they're wearing, they're going to be recognized. Him herding them in so they can't leave. Add that to Amy making this ridiculous spectacle of herself. Well, you know, she ought to be used to that by now. Grabbing perks and free stuff, that's not especially subtle. I mean, Jeff was in that specific Cloud9 as it was happening. How could that possibly have been his response to Amy and Jonah showing up actually at that management conference? And say everyone in the room just reacted to that indiscretion as, oh, a couple of anonymous floor workers embarrassed the company with their antics, who cares? Amy, at least, was suspended for 4 months, sufficient to lose her seniority and health benefits, so someone was paying attention to who these people were. It just, okay, to me it was, okay, fun, a romp, a laugh, a way to paint management as feckless, uncaring boobs, only interested in screwing their workers out of any pay or benefits that they can manage, but, oh, actually, that was the argument they were making and where they were leaving things. Weird. This one is definitely running long. I should hold off commenting on Doctor Who, but they did it to themselves. The New Year's Day special ran so close to the end of season 11, it kind of felt like a season finale. One that had nothing to do with the rest of the season. Well, not really. Much like Christmas specials, this New Year's special needed to pretty much be a standalone, and despite his vanquishing efforts during the Time War, I don't believe there's been a Doctor since Paul McGann who hasn't faced a Dalek. I mean, John Hurt definitely did. Eccleston did halfway through his season, where Dalek as an episode title was kind of a plot giveaway. Tennant's Daleks arrived via the Void Sphere, I believe, from parallel dimensions, so he can't be faulted for not having wiped those ones out during the Time War, not to mention human Dalek hybrids in Manhattan and the Cult of Skaro. Smith faced World War II Daleks and their swishy new paint jobs, and then later, oh wow, his Daleks had perfected the art of camouflage, incorporating chameleon circuits and posing as people, and he tracked the Impossible Girl to the Dalek Asylum. Capaldi faced down a city of Daleks and took a bit of counseling with them in Twice Upon a Time. He was also on the scene with his TARDIS to help defeat the Daleks and end the Time War. We were maybe kind of hoping that we'd be done with them after that, but no, there was this other one. The biocomponent was somehow defeated by prehistoric humans. It was rent in threes and the pieces dragged to the ends of the Earth. One part was unearthed in Sheffield and exposed to ultraviolet radiation, thus giving it the power to reincorporate its somehow not decomposed pieces, glom onto and possess an archaeologist, and build a steampunk outer casing, threatening to call out and bring the Dalek fleet to Earth, causing all sorts of oh my god drama before the current Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, suddenly remembers that there is no Dalek fleet for it to contact and tips it into the sun. On the plus side, I was able to see the episode that I missed, Kerblam. Corporations promote artificial intelligence over people, and the people sabotage the system in protest. A Luddite extremist planted bombs in packages to disrupt deliveries and cause a public relations nightmare, which would still barely have represented many zeros 157% of the company's actual deliveries. I mean, for Christ's sakes, if 100 Amazon packages blew up, do you imagine for a moment that everyone would stop using Amazon? They ship millions daily, and Kerblam was pan-galactic. You'd likely never hear about it. There'd be maybe local inquiries like insurance payments, and nothing would change, thank you activists. Still, a better premise than the one Capaldi faced down in Smile. Continuing on this BBC theme, I watched the first 2 seasons of Sherlock aired in a marathon on BBC America, and, excuse my French, but holy mother-forking shirtballs! With his several good episodes, but many that strayed from the mark, I associate Stephen Moffat so much with the work that he did over many years on Doctor Who. I forget how absolutely friggin' fantastic he is, how astonishingly capable he is in terms of storytelling and character building and adaptation. Sherlock turns him loose on Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's superhuman creation Sherlock Holmes, and envisions him in today's world solving updated versions of his most compelling cases. The first 2 seasons introduce Jim Moriarty and the woman, Irene Adler, whom he rescues from an ISIS beheading. Mrs. Hudson is perfectly okay with the potential for Dr. John Watson and Holmes taking the Baker Street flats as lovers. "Oh, we get all kinds here," she said, although Moffat didn't update the story that much. Rather, he thought very deeply about the kinds of puzzles that would draw Holmes' interest 100 years later, weaving the millennial reality of the internet into his world, in which 5 pips become tones on a cell phone, the homeless population become his Baker Street irregulars, and Ms. Adler is a diplomatic dominatrix who presents herself to him in the nude. Holmes' brother Mycroft's service in the Home Office provided some fantastic cover, and I've got to say, Moriarty's arch-nemesis to the Great Mind is just impossibly clever. So well done. Definitely some heart in the throat moments in that second season finale. Really, there was nothing about this series that was in the slightest unworthy of the great tradition of Sherlock Holmes. one of Britain's great superheroes, a pantheon that includes Robin Hood, Mary Poppins, James Bond, and the Doctor. Certainly there have been plenty of unworthy knockoffs, but at a time when we got such boobery as Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly pantsing about, these entries were good for the soul, and I'm glad I finally encountered them.
Well, that was lovely.
That isn't quite how I would.
I'd like to speak to your manager.
Feedback.
Finally, as I mentioned up there, I received some actual feedback. I can't believe it. It's just so rare. I mean, there's comment sections all through my show page. I've got Facebook page and Twitter and my email all accessible for my show notes, but I put them out every other week, and I don't really hear back from anyone, so I do hope you're enjoying them. But yeah, in my second ever Video Fuzzy, the video segment, Chris Cooling, I've mentioned him a couple times. He runs the excellent Forgotten Television podcast. In response to my video, which highlighted my transferring hundreds of VHS tapes to thousands of DVDs, Chris asked the very good question, why put them on yet another physical format? Isn't it easier just to make digital files of all of these? Thank you, Chris. I gave my response in the comments in two parts. Quote, I think the problem I was trying to solve in 2007 was bulk, but this collection will always have a physical presence. If I fed the 2,775 discs I have now into the however many terabyte mainframe that would require, I'd still need to catalog it all. Also, if I'm looking to watch a movie I recorded off TNT in 1997, I'm not out any additional time in the grand scheme of things, of pulling up a file from a media cache, then pulling a DVD from a binder. Soon enough, we'll all have Netflix ported directly into the base of our skull, and this whole collection will be redundant, but for now it's a hobby and I'm enjoying it. I then added, oh, and as for why I record current shows to DVD, same reason. The media I want to archive would fill up hard drive space rapidly. Also, it would seem somehow less tangible. If I have a show or a movie on DVD, I have it. Sure, probably soon every possible thing from all of human history will be streamable instantly for a monthly fee or with neurochemically coded ads, but I have it. It's right there. I can pull it up and watch it. I don't need to pay YouTube 99 cents or Amazon $1.99 or $2.99. If I've recorded it, I can just watch it. End quote. Afterwards, it occurred to me that even if it fit, were I to store all of my media on a single hard drive, that hard drive would be one lightning storm away from my having no media. Libraries burn, media becomes obsolete, but there's no reason to make things easier for the agents of chaos and destruction. And so long as I've got a player and a view screen, well, I'll never lack for something to watch. And with that, thank you so much for checking into my video cataloging project. You can check out my catalog listing along with audio links at videofuzzy.blogspot.com and past episodes at Apple Podcasts and iTunes. Feedback is always appreciated. Thanks again, Chris. And you can contact me through my blog or podcast sites or through my Video Fuzzy page on Facebook, or you can follow me at TJ Video Fuzzy on Twitter. For Video Fuzzy, I'm Terry J. Ahman. Happy viewing.
It might be amazing, it might just be scuzzy. We'll find out together on Video Fuzzy.